Okay, so uh, ever imagined breaking through a barrier, like becoming the very first woman to ever, head a whole branch of the U.S. military,
Right.
only to then be like suddenly fired? I mean, talk about a roller coaster.
Oh, wow.
That's what went down with Coast Guard Commandant Linda Fagan back when Trump was in office. We're going deep on this using a CBS News article, and it really makes you think about how leadership and politics can get, well, kind of messy.
Yeah, I mean, this goes way beyond just one person's career, right? It brings up some pretty big questions.
Totally. So first off, let's talk about Fagan's appointment. I mean, it was a huge deal, obviously.
Yeah.
But what did it actually mean for the Coast Guard? An organization that, well, had always been led by men up to that point.
Right, right. See, the Coast Guard, even though it's a military branch, it's got its own unique vibe. It's smaller, more focused on like maritime safety and, law enforcement. So Fagan getting appointed, it wasn't just symbolic. It kind of hinted at a possible change in leadership style, a fresh perspective on what the Coast Guard is all about.
The article doesn't really dig into like specific policy changes or anything, but it does say that her getting fired was like completely out of the blue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no warning, no public explanation, just boom, she's out.
Hmm. And that's where things get interesting when you look at the political scene back then. The Trump administration, well, they were known for doing things their own way, and sometimes that meant being a little unpredictable. There were quite a few high-ranking officials who got the boot pretty suddenly,
Right.
whether it was because of disagreements or just, wanting to shake things up. It was a pretty volatile environment.
So was Fagan's dismissal like part of a bigger trend? Or was there something specific about, her leadership that clashed with the administration?
Well, it's hard to say for sure without more insider info, but you got to remember this was during a time when things were pretty tense politically.
Yeah.
The Trump administration was really focused on border security, immigration enforcement, which are, directly related to what the Coast Guard does.
Right.
It's possible that they butted heads over how to handle those issues.
Okay, but what about how this affected other women in the military? Seeing someone like Fagan reach the top only to be, let go so abruptly,
Hmm.
that must have been pretty discouraging.
Definitely. It raised concerns about how committed the administration really was to diversity and inclusion in the armed forces. I mean, there were people wondering whether women, even after achieving these historic milestones, would actually be accepted and supported in leadership roles.
So Fagan's firing created this kind of ripple effect, but as you mentioned, the article doesn't talk about any major political crisis or fallout. What about the Coast Guard itself? How did they deal with this sudden change at the top?
Well, the Coast Guard, like any military branch, is built to be resilient. They've got procedures in place for leadership transitions, even unexpected ones. But you can bet this had an impact. It probably created uncertainty, maybe even some anxiety among the ranks.
So we've got this picture of this historic appointment, then a sudden dismissal, and a whole bunch of unanswered questions. What's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean for someone trying to understand how leadership works, especially in these high-pressure situations like the military?
I think it shows the tension between political power and the need for stability in these crucial institutions like the Coast Guard. It makes you think about what safeguards, if any, could be put in place to prevent these abrupt leadership changes that could potentially disrupt national security or, demoralize the people who dedicate their lives to serving the country.
Huh?
It really raises the question, how do you strike a balance between holding people accountable and making sure there's consistent, effective leadership?
Wow. That's a question we're thinking about for sure. Thanks for diving into this with me.
Anytime.